Hey friends, thanks for following along. This is Fairy Tale Thief, episode 6. After Brock left for the beach, Grace went back into the house, spotted Toby parked in front of the TV watching cartoons, and headed for his bedroom. She found the cell phone in his backpack. Knowing calls were free on the weekend, she slipped the phone into her pocket and headed outside. She had to tell someone about the kidnapping. Before settling down at the base of an orange tree, she glanced at Brock's house, trying to see if he'd already gone surfing like he said he was going to. Since she couldn't look through the garage walls to see if his surfboard or car were there or not, she hunkered down, trying to be as invisible as possible, and pressed Kelly's number. "Hey," she answered, "how's the circus?" Keeping her voice low, Grace gave her a much different answer than the one she'd given to her sister Heather. Kelly listened in stunned silence. After Grace had filled her in on everything from the pig costume to the kidnapping, Kelly said, "This is so not you." "I know, right?" "You have to tell the police." "The police? What if they don't believe me? Besides, what am I going to say? I'm being stalked by short people and kidnapped by guys driving carriages and carrying swords?" "It does sound crazy." Kelly sounded thoughtful. "You have to come home." "I can't." "Yes, you can. I'll make it happen." "How?" "I'll send you the plane fare." "No, I can't take your money. Besides, I'm not going to run away. That would kill my mom." "But what if those loons kill you?" "If they had wanted to hurt me, they would have. Instead, someone brought me home and put me in bed." Ew, kinky. It wasn't like that, though. Then what was it like? Weird. Just weird. Kelly didn't respond, but Grace thought she heard clicking on the other end of the phone line. "What are you doing?" Grace asked. "I'm checking flights." "You're what?" "There," Kelly said after a minute. "I'm coming to visit." "What?" Grace repeated. "I just booked a flight from Portland to John Wayne Airport." "Oh no, what's your mom going to say?" "She'll be cool with it," Kelly said. Grace wondered why Janet Abernathy was so cool about everything when Grace's own parents were usually somewhere between scalding and sizzling. She knew it had something to do with Janet's fat attorney paycheck and the fact that Kelly was an only, largely unsupervised child. Inside, Grace found her mom doing the breakfast dishes. I've saved you some chicks and sticks," Jeannie said, using the family's pet name for eggs and sausage links. "Thanks," Grace returned, "but I'm not really hungry." She picked up a dish towel and began to dry the dishes. Jeannie had loaded onto a drying rack. Her parents didn't have any newfangled luxuries like a dishwasher, microwave, or garbage disposal. Grace was surprised Grandpa had even sprung for a toaster, washing machine, or dryer, although she could imagine his excuses for those things too, even though at some point he must have ponied up for them. Who needs a toaster when you can build a fire and roast your bread using a fork? If the good Lord wanted you to have a washing machine, then he wouldn't have created rocks and streams. Who needs a dryer when you live in sunny California? "Mom," Kelly began, "Grace is coming to visit. I hope that's okay." Jeannie's dish rag stopped with swishing and she turned to study Grace. "She's paying for it, not me," Grace said. "But doesn't she have school?" "Remember, Salmondale High doesn't start until after Labor Day." Jeannie put on a bright, fragile smile and returned to washing dishes. "You know, I love Kelly," she said slowly. "You're wondering what your parents will say." Grace wiped a glass and put it in the cupboard to her left. "I know she doesn't eat very much." "Oh, Mom," Grace wailed, "that just makes me sad." Jeannie shot a glance over her shoulder. "I know, and Janet has always been so thoughtful and generous, but it's not my food." "She can eat my food," Grace said. "Maybe we can just pilfer the oranges off the neighbor's tree or scrounge the trash bins behind Trader Joe's." Jeannie let out a strangled laugh and plucked a soapy bowl out of the sink. Suds clung to her forearms like frothy lamb's wool. "I know you think living here is easy for me, but it's not." "I know," Grace said. "I'm sorry if this will give your parents more to complain about." Jeannie bumped Grace with her shoulder. "Hey, want to hear a joke?" Grace really wanted to talk about her stingy grandparents and why their family was forced to cater to them. She also wanted to know what her mom and dad had been fighting about before he left for Korea. And while they were having a heart-to-heart, maybe Grace should tell her mom about the dwarfs, the men who had kidnapped her, the sword fight, and her mysterious reappearance in her own bed this morning. But she guessed that if Jeannie would rather tell a joke, she could listen. A nun enters a covenant and a pledge of silence. After 5 years, she's allowed to speak 2 words. Hard bed, she tells the priest. After 10 years, she tells him food cold. And after 15 years, she says, I quit. It's just as well, says the priest. You've done nothing but gripe since you've been here. Grace smiled, even though she felt like she didn't have a whole lot to smile about. That evening, Gabby showed up at Grace's door around 7. What are you doing? She asked, running her gaze over her. Why aren't you ready? Ready? Grace echoed, looking down at her holey sweatpants and Organ Ducks t-shirt. The party? Gabby rolled her eyes. Didn't Brock tell you? He told me to invite you. Grace scratched her head, trying to remember. The entire morning was a little fuzzy. Never mind. Gabby held up her makeup bag. I came prepared. She pushed through the door. But you can't go like that. Grace's thoughts skittered over her wardrobe before wandering into Heather's side of the closet. She was surprised and a little proud of herself that it hadn't gone there first. Where are we going? Liza Stanley lives around the corner. She's kind of a mouse, but since her parents are loaded, she gives the best party. And it's her birthday. But I don't know her. Grace hesitated at the bottom of the stairs. And I don't have a gift. No worries, Gabby said, pausing on the 3rd step from the top. I collected some beauty supplies from work. You can sign your name on the card. Are you sure? Gabby climbed down the few steps separating them and took Grace's arm to pull her up the stairs. I'm positive, but only if you wear something that doesn't reek of salmon pile. They met Heather in the hall. You should come with us, Grace told her sister, feeling bad that Heather had to stay at home. Heather shook her head. I already graduated from high school. She must have overheard Gabby slamming Grace's sweats because she asked, want to borrow my new occult jeans? Grace threw her arms around Heather's neck. You're the best. I know, Heather said on her way downstairs. She's gorgeous, Gabby whispered once Heather was out of sight. I know, she should take up modeling or something. Gabby grabbed Grace's arm and froze as if an idea had struck and turned her into a statue. Abso-freaking-lutely. I think it's really hard to be a model. Grace pulled Gabby into the room she shared with Heather. Not if you know someone. Gabby watched Grace rifle through the laundry pile. Grace fished out Heather's best jeans and her favorite macrame top from their closet. You know someone? Because Heather had long legs, Grace had to wear heels when she borrowed her sister's pants. But because she really liked the way the pants fit, she'd gladly spend the night tottering, as long as she didn't trip over anything or anyone. My cousin Roger is a photographer for KYP. Know Your Peeps, the celebrity magazine? Grace slipped on the jeans and pulled the top over her head. Gabby beamed with pride. He knows all sorts of people. Daniel Hartwood, Mac Trevor, Lady G. Wow. You could be a model too if you weren't so tiny. Grace tried to imagine herself walking down a runway or giving a camera a Zoolander look. I'm okay with my size. As you should be, Gabby said, taking Grace's shoulder and steering her to a chair in front of a mirror. What happened to you last night? Brock didn't say. Gabby opened up her makeup bag and pulled out the foundation and a sponge. Grace debated on what to tell her. I looked for the little men, but when I couldn't find them, I walked home. Gabby poured some makeup on a sponge and fixed her gaze on Grace. Do you think I'm making this up? Grace asked, glad that she had left out the poisoned apple and sword fight. Gabby snorted a laugh. Maybe I'd think so if I hadn't seen those guys trailing after you. Do you think I should tell the police? Gabby selected a tube of lipstick. It does sound pretty crazy. I know, and I'd rather not tell my mom. She has enough to worry about with adding a psycho daughter to the mix. You should probably tell someone about them. I'm telling you. Lisa Stanley lived in a giant white colonial that looked like it belonged on the New England coast rather than in a California subdivision. Music thrummed through the hedges that separated the front lawn from the back. Her dad has a band, Gabby whispered. They're red hot chili pepper wannabes, she shrugged. How can you tell your dad that you'd rather have a DJ? Grace followed Gabby across the lawn, up the front steps, and through the open doorway. A girl with long, straight blonde hair waved when they came in. She was slightly taller than Grace, and her wide eyes made her look like Alice in Wonderland. A giant cake covered with candles on the dining room table told Grace that Liza had to be at least Grace's age. Bowls of chips, platters of cookies, and a fruit tray surrounded the punch bowl. Wine goblets stood on one end of the table. Someone touched Grace's elbow. We looked for you last night, Amy said. She wore a black and white striped t-shirt dress that hung to her mid-thighs and a pair of red Converse tennis shoes. All her nails matched her shoes, except the little one on her left hand that had been painted black. Grace curled her own blasé nails into her fist. She repeated her lie. I walked home. We would have given you a ride, Oliver said, looking paler than usual. I know, but I didn't want to make anyone leave. You walked home in that pig suit? Oliver asked, disbelief in his tones. Well, I did get some strange looks. Grace, who had been talking to Liza in the dining room, Chase, who had been talking to Liza in the dining room, met her gaze and immediately headed their way. Gabby noticed, and after screwing her lips into a scowl, disappeared down the hall. Chase's expression clearly said he wanted to go after her, but Grace stopped him. Hey, where's your pig suit? He grinned. I ditched it, just like you ditched us last night. It wasn't you, it was me, she told him. I get that. His grin faded, and she looked over her shoulder to see what had caught his attention. Gabby leaned toward Charmant, chatting and batting her eyelashes. He looked as perfect today as he had yesterday. He still wore the loose white shirt and tall boots, but tonight he had on a pair of well-fitting jeans. Last night's memories flooded Grace. The canyon, the carriage, the sword fight. Had it all been a dream? A warning? Had it even really happened? Gabby's reined in hot horse guy, Amy said under her breath. Remember, his name is Roy Charmant. Figures a guy with a horse would be named Roy, Oliver scoffed. Why do you say that? Amy asked. Roy Rogers, Oliver said. Who? Grace asked. Don't you people ever watch Net at night? We don't get cable, Grace said. Oliver gave her a blank stare. Well, it's just as well. Net movies are better anyway. Grace thought about explaining to him that they didn't get that either, but decided to let it drop. Amy elbowed Grace. Looks like Gabby could use our help. With what? Her brother asked. Amy silenced him with a sharp glance. Oliver and Chase looked at each other and rolled their eyes as Amy took Grace's arm and steered him through the crowd. Hey, Gabs, Amy said when they reached the dining room. Gabby rested her butt against the dining room table and crossed one ankle over the other. Hey, guys, you remember Roy? It was Amy's turn to bat her lashes, but Charmant wasn't paying any attention to her. His gaze met Grace's. Who are you really? He asked. I told you. I'm Grace James. He swallowed a long drink from his bottle of soda. This is what you said last night. Because it's the truth. But you bear a striking resemblance to someone I know well, and her name is Blanche. He flinched. Did you enjoy the circus? If he had kidnapped Grace, then he would know the answer to that. It's kind of a blur for me, she told him. She walked home, Gabby blurted out, in the pig suit. The tension in Roy's shoulders eased, and the muscles in his face softened. He lifted his eyebrows at Grace. 'Tis a pity I wasn't there to save you. Is that what you would have called it? She asked him, her voice hard. True, he had saved her, but after that, he'd taken her somewhere else. But of course, he looked offended and placed his hand on his heart. I don't trust you, Grace told him. You cut me to the quick, child, he said. I'm not a child. You can't be much older than me. You would be surprised. Charmant reached behind his back and pulled out a glass flute full of an amber liquid. She wondered where it had come from and if he'd been carrying it around just for her. Would you care for a drink? No. She laced her voice with resolve and hoped it sounded more confident than scared. I'll take it, Gabby said. Thinking fast, Grace tottered on her heels and bounced against the glass. It fell to the floor and landed on its side. Most of the liquid puddled on the hardwood floor. Oh, geez, I'm so sorry. I'll clean this up. That's okay. No worries. A middle-aged woman dressed like a hippie pushed through the crowd. She grabbed a handful of napkins off the table and knelt beside Grace. You must be Liza's mom, Grace said, grabbing her own fistful of napkins and sopping up the spill. She grinned. How can you tell? I'm Grace James. You must be new. I thought I knew all of Liza's friends. I came here with Gabby, and you're right. I just moved here from Oregon. Grace stood, her hands full of the soaking napkins. Roy stared at Grace with suspicious eyes. Here, give me those, Mrs. Stanley said, holding out her hands. Grace itched for her microscope. She wanted to analyze the napkins and see if Charmant had really thought he could poison her 2 nights in a row. She curled her fingers around the napkins. I need to wash my hands, she told Mrs. Stanley. Of course, dear, Mrs. Stanley said. Let me show you the powder room. Was Orange County the only place in the country where people called the toilet a powder room? Grace followed Mrs. Stanley to a tiny room tucked underneath a massive staircase. Grace closed the door and locked it. Staring at herself in the mirror, she willed her heart to slow down. With Gabby's makeup on, she looked the same, but different. Better, and yet not quite herself. She studied the napkins. Of course, they couldn't tell her anything, yet. She needed her microscope for a better reading. If she put the napkin in her jeans pocket, she'd have a wet spot in a place she'd rather not. If she went home, she would be ditching her new friends 2 nights in a row. If she made it a habit, it probably wouldn't be too long before she found herself without any friends. Not knowing what else to do, she folded one of the napkins into a tiny square and tucked it low into her bra. She smoothed down her shirt. Beneath the macrame, the outline of the napkin was barely visible. Grace gave her reflection another glance and whispered, You're not crazy. You are completely sane. Those little men and Charmant had just mistaken her for someone else. But something tugged in the back of her mind, something important. She needed the internet. She opened the door and bounced into Brock. Hey, he said. Hi. You okay? Yeah, why? I don't know, he said. You look determined? Grace laughed, but it sounded wrong. Do you speak French? No, I'm in your Spanish class, remember? He seemed insulted that she hadn't noticed him. Yeah, do you have a phone on you? He gave her a puzzled look, but dug his smartphone out of his pocket. Can you help me look something up? What? Hey, babe. Alicia came from behind and draped her arm around Brock's shoulder. What you doing? Something in Grace's expression must have told Brock that she didn't want Alicia looking over her shoulder because he typed in the password and handed her his phone. Bring it back. Grace slipped down the hall to where the noise of the party was muted. She heard the buzz of multiple conversations, the strong, steady beat of the band singing about dancers on the beach, and laughter, but it all faded away after she typed Charmant into the Google Translate and came up with one word, charming, as in Prince Charming. Chapter 11. Grace pushed through the crowd, found Gabby, pulled her into the kitchen, and waved at Amy to follow. They formed a tight circle in a corner between the giant stainless steel refrigerator and the door to the walk-in pantry. She showed him the Google Translate screen. Prince Charming, Gabby muttered. Talk about an ego, Amy said. He and his little friends are screwing with you, Gabby said. Yeah, but why? Gabby and Amy both shook their heads. He's cute, Gabby said, but we have to stay away from him. Should we tell the others? Grace asked. Amy looked over her shoulder, indecision etched in the creases of her forehead. Tell us what? Grace asked. For once, Gabby didn't give him her shoulder. Instead, she showed him the screen. He's a fruitcake, Chase said, the tone of his voice more serious than his words. Nuttier than peanut butter, Amy agreed. What are we going to do? Gabby asked. We don't have to do anything, right? Grace said. We can just stay away from him. Let's go, Chase said, tucking his arm through Gabby's. She shook him off. I'm still mad at you. Let's go to my house and watch a movie, Oliver said. Okay, Grace returned, but I have to return Brock's phone. Don't leave without me. While the others headed out to their cars, Grace followed the sound of Brock's laughter. She found him in a tight semicircle of kids playing a card game she didn't recognize. Alicia had her head in his lap and her cards poised above her face. Grace wanted to point out that Brock could see her cards, but she guessed that Alicia must not care. She probably knew that as long as she had Brock, she had already won. Grace leaned over and dropped the phone into the breast pocket of Brock's t-shirt. Thanks, she said. He looked up. Find what you're looking for? Sort of. She shot another glance at Prince Charming, a.k.a. Charmant, lounging on the other side of the room, watching her with lazy eyes before she headed out the door. That night after the movies at Amy's, Grace told her mom everything. She started with the day she first met the dwarfs on the sidewalk, moved on to the kidnapping and sword fight, mentioned the mermaid, and ended with the discovery of Prince Charming. While her mom stared at her with a stunned expression, Grace said, "You have to let me go back to Salmondale to live with Kelly." The room Jeannie shared with Toby fell quiet. In the soft summer night, Grace heard the gentle whoosh of Toby's breath as he slept beside them in the queen-size bed. Jeannie had her back propped up against the headboard while Grace sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed. Jeannie wagged her head. "I don't know what to say. You've never lied to me before, not that I know of." "I'm not lying now," Grace whisper yelled. Jeannie swallowed hard and audibly. "You know how crazy this sounds, right? For some reason, these guys have mistaken me for Snow White." Jeannie finished her sentence. "You do look like her, you know." "Mom, she's a Disney cartoon character." Grace pulled the mermaid stone out from under her blouse. In the soft evening light, it cast a warm glow. "See this? A mermaid gave it to me." Jeannie's eyebrow hitched, and Grace couldn't tell that her mom didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Grace didn't want to make things worse, but she had to tell her. "I tried to follow her, but someone stopped me." Jeannie audibly swallowed again. "If you really want to go home so badly," her voice trailed away. "Don't you? Why don't we all go?" "Your grandparents," her mom began. "Let them hire someone else to clean up their messes." "You know they won't." "Is this what Dad wants?" Grace pursued. "Your dad isn't here." "Why are we really here?" Grace asked. Jeannie exhaled, and Grace watched a dozen conflicting emotions flicker over her mom's face. "It'll be cheaper for you if you don't have to cover my tuition," Grace appealed to her mom's wallet. Jeannie leaned forward and placed her hand on Grace's knee. "I don't mind paying for your tuition." She shook Grace's leg. "You're worth it. You're going to score a fat scholarship, go to the best college, and have the whole world at your feet." Which was just another way of saying that the world hadn't fallen at Jeannie's feet, because maybe she'd fallen for Grace's dad. So Jeannie was going to make sure that the world tumbled for Grace. "They give scholarships to kids from Salmondale." Tears filled Jeannie's eyes. "You don't understand. I'm not ready for you to grow up." She sucked in a deep breath. "But that's selfish, isn't it? If you really think you'd be happier in Salmondale, maybe you should go. But sweetie, think about it. You'd have to go back to work at the dairy. I couldn't just let you sponge off of Janet. You'd have to earn your keep. And you need a car to get around. Plus the flight." Jeannie blew out a breath. "I can earn money," Grace said, "and maybe Lucy will hire me." Jeannie slowly nodded and rubbed a tired hand over her eyes. "Let me sleep on it. We'll talk about it some more in the morning, okay?" Leaning forward, Grace hugged her mom hard and kissed her on the cheek. And just for a moment, Grace felt like she was the parent and her mom was the child in need of comfort. Settling down, she put her head in Jeannie's lap. "Tell me the Snow White story," she said, wanting to be young again. Jeannie had told Grace the story 100 times. Some things were constant. Snow White's beauty, the mirror that always told the truth, the friendly dwarfs. But with each retelling, Jeannie always tweaked it. Jeannie idly stroked Grace's hair. In a bleak midwinter, when snowflakes danced from the sky, a queen sat sewing at her window, dreaming of the child she carried. Careless, she pricked her finger with the needle. A drop of crimson blood fell into the snow on the windowsill. The red on the white, shadowed by the black sky, looked so beautiful that the queen wished for a daughter just as lovely. The queen died. The king, who had never known his love's wish, gazed at the new baby, marveled at her pale skin, red lips, and ebony hair, and declared that she would be known as Snow White. In time, the lonely king remarried a beautiful but vain and cruel woman. Before her marriage, she possessed little of material means, but she had one prized possession, a mirror. All mirrors are remarkable things, for they cannot lie. They can only reflect what they see. If you are smiling, the mirror smiles back. If you are sad, the mirror mourns as well. But this mirror was magic, because it not only told what it saw at the moment, but also reflected what had come before and what would come to pass. Every morning the queen stood before it, looked at herself and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" And the mirror always answered, "You, my queen, are fairest of all." And this pleased the queen. But Snow White grew in beauty and grace. Her beauty, unlike the queen's, was more than skin deep. She glowed with the beauty of goodness. One day when the queen asked the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" it answered, "You, my queen, are fair, 'tis true, but Snow White will always be fairer than you." This frightened the queen because she knew her beauty wielded power. She turned green with envy, and from that hour on, whenever she looked at Snow White, her hatred grew until it squeezed out all reason. One day she summoned a huntsman and said to him, "Take Snow White into the woods, kill her, and as proof of her death, bring her lungs and her liver back to me." The huntsman tried to obey. Deep in the woods, he unsheathed his hunting knife to kill the girl. "Oh, huntsman," Snow White had cried, "spare me." Because of her beauty, the huntsman took pity on her and said, "Run away, child." On the way back to the castle, a boar crossed the huntsman's path. He killed it, cut out its lungs and liver, and took them back to the queen as proof of Snow White's death. The cook boiled them with salt, and the wicked woman ate them, supposing she had eaten Snow White's organs, thinking that now she would possess Snow White's inner beauty. All alone in the great forest, Snow White ran over sharp stones, through thorns, and plunged deeper and deeper into the woods. As day turned to night, she stumbled upon a little house. Inside, everything was diminutive and filthy. She cleaned the house from the attic to the stone floor. Afterwards, she lay down on a bed, entrusted herself to God, and fell asleep. After dark, the men of the house returned home. They were the 7 dwarfs who picked and dug ore in the mountains. They lit their 7 candles immediately and noticed Snow White's handiwork. They found her asleep on a bed. They marveled at her beauty, but did not wake her. The 7th dwarf had to sleep with his companions 1 hour with each one until the night had passed. Toby roused, rubbed his eyes, and glared at Grace. "I feel sorry for that dwarf." "Sorry, Tobes," Jeannie said, running her hand over the top of his buzzed head. "We didn't mean to wake you." "It's okay," he mumbled and burrowed back into his pillows. Pulling the quilt around his shoulders, he said, "But now you have to skip to the good part." "What's the good part?" Grace asked. "You know, where the prince slays the dragon." "That's the Disney version," Grace told him, "not the real story." Jeannie laughed. "You don't want to know the real story. Legend has it a mean old man poisoned apples because he was tired of the village children stealing his fruit." "But what happened to the dragon?" Toby asked. "No dragon. The villagers put on a pair of iron shoes into burning coals, used tongs to place them before the queen, and forced her to step into the red-hot shoes. She danced until she fell down dead." "That's dumb," Toby said. "Not as dumb as what probably really happened," Jeannie said. "What's that?" Toby asked. "In the true version, the evil stepmother gets away with murdering the princess." Jeannie tucked Toby's blanket even tighter. "And that is why, my dearies, you must make sure I live a long and healthy life, so you'll never have a stepmother." She said it like she was joking, but something in her tone made Grace wonder. On Monday, Brock went to school, determined to end things with Alicia. He avoided her during the first half of the day and caught up with her at lunch. She was sitting at the table with Devin, an uneaten apple in front of her. Her canary yellow sweater matched her hair. He stared at her, momentarily blinded and flooded with memories. She was the first person he had met when he moved to Santa Magdalena 2 years ago. She'd been standing under a tree, holding a can of tuna fish high in the air, a pleading look on her face. Crows flitted around her. A squirrel in a neighboring tree chattered, but a tabby with a fat tail a few branches above her refused to acknowledge her in any way. "My grandmother's cat," she'd said. "If I lose Dory, I might as well become a beauty school dropout now." She was so beautiful, Brock didn't think she needed beauty school, but he didn't say so then. "She pays my St. Mag's tuition," she had said. "I go to St. Mag's," he told her, "or at least I will in a few days." He'd made eye contact with the cat, something he hadn't been able to do with Alicia right away. The cat twitched her whiskers and flicked her tail, completely bored with him. Brock accepted the challenge, grabbed the lowest branch, and swung into the tree. "Wait," Alicia had called. "Take me with you." "No, you have to stay down here in case Dory decides to make a jump for it," which is exactly what Dory had done. He thought Alicia would be upset, but she clapped her hands when the cat darted through a hedge and disappeared behind a wrought iron fence. Brock had hurtled down and landed beside her. Aren't you going to go after her? Nah, she'd said. Why not? Well, for one thing, that's my grandmother's house. She tilted her shoulder at the hacienda through the hedge. And for another, if I did that, then I couldn't do this. She'd put her arms around his neck and kissed him. She'd kissed him even before he knew her name. At the time, it had blown his mind, but now he saw it as symbolic of all the things that were wrong about their relationship. Stealing his spine, he touched her shoulder. Can I talk to you outside? Why? She asked, but he guessed from her expression that she knew. I have to stay in here. She motioned at the microphone set up on the opposite side of the cafeteria line. It's open mic day. Devin's going to play for Chad. Devin nodded to the guitar propped up beside her. You can say whatever you need to say here. Or not. Alicia lifted her chin. Brock sat at the table and glanced around for Grace. She was sitting with Dillinger, Amy, and Oliver. They were huddled together as if making plans that didn't include him. When are you up? He asked Devin. We're after the flat tones, Devin said. Brock watched a kid he recognized from his English class approach the mic. He tapped it a few times, sending rhythmic thumps over the airwaves. Clearing his throat, he began a poem he'd obviously written himself. Is this about that night at the beach? Alicia whispered, because that was nothing. She waved her hand in front of her face as if shooing away invisible flies. You mean when I drove Grace home? He whispered back. The girl at the next table gave them a dirty look. Another girl put her finger to her lips. An expression Brock couldn't read flickered in Alicia's eyes. She waved her hand again. I'm over that. His throat tightened, making it hard to swallow. You should get over it too, Alicia said. I know Chase feels like I do. Chase Dillinger? Oh, come on. Alicia scooted around so that she faced him. It was a hookup. Didn't mean anything. Her smile didn't soften her words or touch her eyes. Brock sent the guy at the microphone an apologetic glance before he turned back to Alicia. You hooked up with Dillinger? I told you it was nothing. It wasn't even a full hookup, more of a half hookup, Alicia said, just as the guy at the mic ended his poem. Applause thundered through the cafeteria. It seemed appropriate. Brock stood. Where are you going? Alicia asked, her voice shrill. Somewhere else, he answered, using his regular voice. You're overreacting. Alicia motioned for him to sit. Devin and Chad took the stage. People politely clapped. Devin strung the guitar around her neck and plucked a few notes. Chad started singing about a magic dragon. I'm not reacting at all, Brock whispered, feeling shell-shocked. My breaking up with you has nothing to do with whatever you and Dillinger might have done, although it does seem like a pretty good reason. Alicia bounced to her feet. You're breaking up with me? Shh, people around them hissed, sounding like a chorus of snakes. Down in front, someone called out. Alicia pointed her finger in Brock's face. If you walk away from me, you'll be sorry. Brock walked away and didn't feel sorry at all. Okay, that's the end of episode 6. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed it, hit the like and subscribe button and stick around for episode 7.